Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kind for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today, as usual. In fact, we have a great interview with David Cobb, who ran for president back with the Green Party in the early 2000s. We have a great discussion on democracy and some of the things that we did together. But again, it's going to be a good show. Anyway, what's going on? What's up? Let's see. We've got in the house, Patrick Magner says meow from Houston, Texas. We got Michael Rudnin in the house from Brooklyn, New York. We've got Yvette Avery Harrod from Atlanta, Georgia. Paul Fleming from Powder Springs, Georgia. Don is in the house on Substack, as well as Lillian Armstrong. How you doing this morning? Paul Fleming says the creepy POS Mike Johnson is out there arguing that not extending the ACA subsidies is no big deal because it only impacts 7% of the American population. 7% is equal to roughly 24 million people. Meanwhile, the GOP is frantically bending over backwards to give tax cuts to billionaires. There are only 900 billionaires in the United States. They're destroying this entire country for 900 people. It's amazing, right? That argument, did you come up with that? That is amazing. Exactly. 7% is 24 million. But it's deeper than that. And if we let them get away with that argument, Paul Fleming, that it only affects 7% of the people, we get them off easy. It does not only affect 7% of the population. The subsidies affect 7% of the population, which means 7% of the population won't receive the subsidies that will cause their health care to be that much more expensive. But if their health care becomes more expensive, which means many of them will forego the health care altogether, that means that those people who are paying health insurance, their rates are going to go up. So let's not let them off the hook because they would like, look, so let's say they lose 7% of the vote in a red area because, these subsidies affect red areas more than they affect blue areas. So let's say they figure, well, we win our districts by 9 points, 10 points. If for some reason a large percentage of that 7% doesn't vote for us, well, look, we pretty much neutered Obamacare and we still win the election. We can't let them off that easy. We have to make the problem of the 7% be the problem of the 100%. Or I should say the 99%, because the 1% never have a problem. So we need to coax this in the words of the 99%. In other words, those 7%, it's the 99% we have to ensure it affects, Paul. You know what I mean? So, yes, it's the subsidies are going to affect 7% of the people, meaning their rates are either going to go up or they'll stay and forego insurance altogether. But the problem is going to be deeper. It's going to affect us 100% because it's the entire pool. When the insurance industry looks at sick people, they look at it at the entire pool. And when those sick people go to the emergency rooms, etc., what the emergency room is going to do is they're going to have to raise their prices on paying customers. And who are paying customers? Those with insurance, which means the rates for the insurance go up for everybody. So let's make sure and coach that right. But Don says, anybody ever thought about the fact that we pay into our healthcare system from every one of our paychecks throughout our working lives? That's enough to build hospitals, clinics, and other health facilities. Look, you nailed it. I spoke about that on my morning show. 3% of your salary, not salary, 3% of your income. That means salaried income. That means wage income. That means capital gains income to some extent. 3% of that goes into the Medicare trust fund as an insurance. And what we are proposing for Medicare for all is we should do more and just forgo private insurance altogether. Kill private insurance and then collect money from everybody from their wages, which would make it a progressive tax, right? Make it a progressive tax on wages. You know, you may start out with 3% for the least of us, meaning the people making the least. And then as you make more money, you increase that percentage commensurate with what a progressive tax rate should really look like. That will solve all our medical problems. Because here's the funny part, right? If we were to put all our dollars, our healthcare dollars, into healthcare and not into the management of healthcare, we would immediately garner over several $100 billion every year that won't be going to shareholders, executive bonuses, advertising, database management, real estate taxes, all of that will be gone. And all of that money instead would go directly into providing health care. Done? It can be done. It can be done. It's also enough to pay for Medicare for all or implement a public option instead. We are paying additional free money to billionaires insurance companies. You're absolutely right. All right, look. The piece that I'm playing now from David Cobb is a bit long, so I need to go ahead and get that started. So let's go ahead and do that as I bring it up. Bear with me 1 second. I'm about to get it started, and here we go. Welcome to another edition of Politics and Right. My name is Egberto Willies, your host. David Cobb. David Cobb is a people's lawyer who has sued corporate polluters, lobbied elected officials, run for political office himself, been arrested for nonviolent civil disobedience. He has been lead organizers and the head of many progressive organizations working to realize one's own empowerment. Cobb is the co-host of Democracy at Work's Redneck Gone Green. Senor David Cobb, how are you doing this morning, my friend?
You know, Egberto, I'm doing well and happy to be here on this program and happy to be reconnecting with you.
Man, we go back a long time doing so much together, from the coffee party to Move to Amend to many other organizations. We worked in concert. In fact, being up on boards together, etc. It's great reconnecting with a former presidential runner. I mean, you remember back in when was that? Back in the 90s, I believe.
Well, I was involved in the global justice movement in the 90s, mostly on the barricades and protest and demonstration side of work, doing some living wage campaigns in Houston, Texas, where I know you live. So I have a long history of doing work in the 90s, but I actually ran for president and was the Green Party's nominee for president of the United States in 2004.
It was 2004. Okay, that's right. That's what. Hey, after the years start to mount, you start to get, when did that happen again? When did that happen again? But anyway, David, I wanted to reconnect with you for many reasons. Specifically, before we get started, tell us a little bit about what you have been doing over the last few years.
Well, Egberto, ever since you and I were working together now decades ago, the whole premise of my work has always been to make real the promise of democracy in the United States. And I have come to realize the truth that we do not The most dangerous threat to democracy in the United States is the mistaken belief that we actually have one. Because democracy comes from the Greek word demos, the people, kratio, rule or power. The people rule or have the power. The reality is that there are ways that we can exercise power. There are ways that we can influence things, but this system is set up to allow a predatory class, a small ruling elite to actually run things, and that's structurally. So you mentioned the move to Amendes, where you and I were working on a constitutional amendment to abolish in its entirety the illegitimate court-created idea that corporations are persons with constitutional rights. I've engaged in electoral politics. I've engaged in campaigns to abolish the ability for corporations to spend money in elections. I've worked on environmental campaigns. My point is this. All of my work has always been about trying to create a more just, a more fair system. And I have come to realize that government cannot do that for us. Having said that, government can help facilitate these things. Government can make it harder or easier to live in the society that I want. But we, the people, are actually going to have to do it ourselves, which means that we have to engage in both practices individually, organizationally, but also pressure, support, and make policy changes. But ultimately, we need to restructure the entire society. So that's what I'm up to these days.
It's amazing because when you and I met, and one of the first things that we spoke about was the foundation of the country and the Constitution. And I remember one of the things that you told me, and that stuck to my head. And that just tells you the impact one can have on somebody else just by the words, which is why when you're in this kind of business that we are in, why it is so important that we are sure with our words. When you told me one time we're sitting down at one of our conferences and you said, Egberto, the Constitution is but I think you called it a capital document or something.
A property
rights document. And I went back, read the Constitution, and started to look at what you said and said, oh, my God, I never quite looked at it that way. This guy's right. And that made an indelible change in so much of my thinking process and on what is right, what is wrong, how things are distributed, et cetera, and changed it completely. I think before we get deeper into this argument, that is something that I think needs to be illustrated to people, because especially now, where our government has has done all the structures, as you mentioned, the structural problem within the country to do exactly that. Take the property, not earn the property, take the property, whatever that is, capital, etc., and distribute it to that select few that you've spoken about.
Egberto, thank you for that, because it is at its core the founders who rejected monarchy as a form of rule. So I want to acknowledge that. That is a very profound and important change. But they believed and said themselves that the right to property was the foundation of all other rights and independence. That perspective emphasized the way they both wrote the document and including the Bill of Rights, which had to be added afterwards. Let's remember that. So the influence of the Enlightenment and John Locke and others who argued the fundamental natural rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is the actual core. Think about it. There is no idea of the rights of Mother Earth. There are no collective community rights. Never mind the idea of reciprocal responsibilities. So there is a difference, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds legally, but the difference between civil rights and human rights. The Constitution outlines civil rights, rights that a government grants to a citizen, which can be altered in law. But human rights are inherent, universal, inalienable. So there are virtually no examples where that is really identified in the Constitution. Second, there's a focus on negative rights or negative liberties, things that government cannot do, rather than the positive rights. There is no right to housing. There is no right to health care. There is no right to education. There's not even a right to clean air to breathe or clean water to drink. In legal terms, those are considered positive rights. So again, the very framing itself lends itself to this idea that it's all about property rights. And then the last thing that really needs to be said, and that is that include enslaved Africans. Human beings themselves were considered property codified within that Constitution. So to me, I think it's important that we acknowledge and recognize rejection of monarchy as a form of rule is a very powerful idea, but that from the very beginning, the constitutional framework sets up a system of property rights and negative rights of government rather than describing a liberated society.
And, David, for all practical purposes, even we made a documentary when we were at Move to Amend called Democracy Legalized.
It was called Legalized Democracy.
Legalized Democracy. And in that document, we actually showed that America was always on an ascent to give more justice to all, but it was always moving forward, a little bit backward, moving forward. Every time something would happen, we would be on that path to move again into providing more structural liberties to others. But we find ourselves in a position right now where, and I don't, maybe you can tell me, I don't know if we are falling, we're doing 3 steps, 2 steps backwards, or we're doing 2 steps forwards, 3 steps backwards. Where are we on this path to true democracy that you talk about us building from the grassroots and not coming down from above?
Egberto, thank you for lifting up the documentary Legalized Democracy. Of course, you're in it as well. And I would encourage viewers and listeners of Politics Done Right to check it out. You can find that online, Legalized Democracy. Just do a Google or do an internet search on and it'll come up. It's very short. I think it's like 28
minutes. Yeah.
28 minutes. So, but here's the point that I want to make. And that is, as Egberto says, it is absolutely true that U.S. history has been a series of ebbs and flows. And it's important to acknowledge under the constitutional framework, which is the supreme law of the land, every time there's been a constitutional amendment to try to codify more rights for the people, it has come as a result of amendments to the Constitution that have required mass movements of organized people that were educated, active, and engaged in electoral politics, doing all of those things. When corporations and the predatory class have been able to manipulate that document, it always comes as a result of Supreme Court decisions, sometimes votes of 5-4 even, where only 5 people have made really profound decisions that affect our society. So I just want to really underscore again the importance of mass movements that are conscious, politically educated, organized, coherent, coordinated with a plan. So when you ask me, are we sliding backwards or forwards? I say it just depends on what perspective you look at. I'm going to take a step back and share with you and your viewers and listeners why I believe we are in what Antonio Gramsci called a conjuncture. Now, a conjuncture is a moment in history where inherent contradictions and tensions mean that there's going to be a big, huge shift. For example, Egberto, if you want to really understand the day, 9 times out of 10, just study yesterday. And if you want to predict what is likely to happen tomorrow, study today. Because history normally moves in patterns. And once you see the pattern, then you can really understand what's happening. But sometimes there are conjunctures where things come together and there's a big rupture or a split. I'm going to say it simply. We are in a conjuncture now for 3 interrelated reasons. One, an ecological collapse. It's not coming, but it is here and accelerating, and that is global. Secondly, and by the way, that's existential, right? If we do not, our window to actually do something about that is rapidly closing. And if we don't, then we have an existential problem. It's not just the climate catastrophe. There are interconnected ecological benchmarks that we're blowing past. So that is terrifying. But wait, there's more, because we are literally in an economic crisis now, and that crisis is capitalism. And capitalism cannot solve that problem because capitalism is the problem. Mm-hmm. And I'll break it down this way. Remember that capitalism is merely an economic system of extraction, power over domination. And at its core, capitalism is defined as the private ownership of the means of production, that production itself is used for producing goods and services, commodities, rather than just human use. Thirdly, that those commodities are always bought and sold for at a profit. In fact, capitalism has as its premise profit maximization. The only reason you engage in economic commerce is profit maximization. Fourth, the idea that labor itself, human labor, is just one more commodity to be bought and paid for, as opposed to the idea of human labor being dignified and having self-worth. And then the fifth, that the market allocates everything. Those 5 definitions, I mean, I invite your readers and listeners to go and look it up online and see if I didn't get that right. And like,
not to interrupt too much, but you got it absolutely right. I've had Dr. Richard Wolff on here many a times, and he enumerates those exactly, of course, in a little bit wordier manner, but he does just that.
Yeah, that's Dr. Wolff, all right. But all to say, y'all, and by the way, even if you don't agree with that, those are just the objective definitions that any economist will basically give you. But you put them all together, Egberto, and what you have is a machine that rewards and incentivizes the commodification of Mother Earth as fast as it can. And so capitalism is coming to an end, whether we like it or not, because of automation, robotics, technology, and now artificial intelligence. We're creating a society where human labor is not going to be needed. And remember that the reason that the entire society has been created in such a way to allow the owners of the means of production to hire people to extract the surplus value of their labor. That's literally how the system works. Mm-hmm. So capitalism is coming to an end for all of us, which is actually terrifying, because rather than the world that we could be living in, because we have this enclosure system, because we have this entire superstructure being created this way, we are hurtling into fascism. And fascism is coming to rise now, not only in this country, but all across the world, because the systems are failing. And I want to be clear, this system cannot solve the problems. And I don't just mean the problems of the environment or racial justice or gender equity, because the system wasn't designed to do that. I'm saying something different, Egberto. I'm saying this system cannot even solve the problem that it was designed for, which is to maintain order. And we are seeing a collapsing system all around us. And fascism rises in these moments because fascism is an ideology. It's not merely jackbooted thugs and totalitarian governments. It requires a mass movement of people who will agree on an us versus them mentality, hyper-nationalism, toxic masculinity. And what we're seeing across the globe is fascism emerge. And I'll end it with this. Fascism is emerging now globally for the same reason that fascism emerged in the 1930s, because in the 1930s, the entire global system was morphing or evolving from an agrarian society to an industrial one. And now, with automation, technology, robotics, and artificial intelligence, we are moving into a new era where labor itself is not needed to distribute goods and services. I mean, you still need human labor, but way less. And so this is creating a level of disruption, a level, not just unease, but people rightfully understand, like, what is my place in this society? What is going on? And I'll end it again, Egberto. I believe at the end of this, we are either going to be living in some form of ecological balance where there's enough for everyone, because there already is, but it's being distributed fairly and equally within an ecological balance, or we're going to be in some form of fascist hierarchical, top-down horror show. Like really the ability, the neoliberal consensus of like keeping both of those sides and impulses together is collapsing. So this conjuncture in the next 10 years, we will know like what has happened. And I don't think it's clear exactly what it is, but I know the work that I'm doing is trying to move us towards ecological balance, fairness, justice, and genuine democracy.
And this is why I wanted you on. You are one of the best explainers out there on the subject, bar none. And I find it to some extent pitiful that we don't have more coverage of you and others in your cohort to do just this, because what you've just said is likely the most important 8 or so minutes for anyone who believes in having a future to listen to. I want to point out a couple of things here. First of all, for the technocrats that are listening, yeah, many of you know that the definition that the capitalists would give to capitalism is the efficient allocation of resources. I want to remind all of you that there's something called healthcare, where they would tell you that competition within health insurance industries and so forth is what we need to get things done in healthcare. Yet it's the most inefficient form of healthcare, bar none. So that eliminates capitalism as the efficient allocation of resources. There are many other topics that this reminds me of when we would lock ourselves into a house in Berkeley, or lock ourselves in a house in Chicago, or and there are 15, 20 of us just discussing policy like this. And many a times you taking the lead and standing up and talking about these issues. They're so important, and it is something that we really have to get out there. You talk about being at a conjunction right now. What's the word?
Conjuncture.
Conjuncture. I got it. A conjuncture right now. The thing about it is this: we are right at the point where the best things can happen, because people are seeing the results of what they thought would be the right thing. And at this point, they are the ones on the knife's edge that can make that choice to move into the right direction if led appropriately. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that's absolutely correct, Egberto. And first, I want to thank you for reminding me of some of those great strategy and political grappling sessions that we were in. And I do want to underscore, y'all, that I believe in grappling with ideas. And if anybody thinks that I am incorrect, I always welcome, like as you and I have done, Egberto, like let's really struggle through and struggle for clarity, struggle for an understanding, not until either you beat me and I submit to you, or I beat you and you submit to me, but instead like that we can really have the best understanding of whatever it is that we're talking about. The old phrase, intellectual steel sharpens steel. It's a good practice. But the other thing, Egberto, is that process allows me to ask really deep and probing questions of you, and to figure out exactly where you are, where you stand, what your plan is, how you're seeing the world. And you can do the same with me. That way we can understand where we agree and where we disagree without it making us enemies, right? And we can figure out, okay, well, we've got so much agreement. There's so many ways that we could absolutely work together in a very explicit, concrete way. We can make plans and strategies and even tactics to do that. But there'll be some things that we disagree with. So rather than fight over, if I like to say, Egberto, maybe you've heard me say it, if I find out that I agree with you on 90% of the stuff and only disagree with you 10%, then my pledge to you is I'm going to try my best to spend 90% of our time together in agreement, figuring out what we can do, and only 10% of our time debating. You and I don't agree with everything, but we already know that because we've had so many conversations, and we know where we can work together, which is a lot, and some of the stuff not. And so we don't need to let it slow us down. So I just really wanted to point out that what you talked about, what I understand that to be political struggle. And I do not think that we can understand this world, much less make a plan to win without political education. So, I look at Mamdani and his amazing victory in New York City, right? Everybody I've talked to has told me it is absolutely true. Well over 100,000 people were in that campaign in a very real and meaningful way. Like that, remember, that's not just the voters. That's the quote campaign staff. Almost all of it unpaid. Like that's remarkable. As an organizer, Egberto, can you imagine?
We know that.
Like, wow. Like,
yes.
So here's what I'm saying is, I think if I were in New York City, I would be most interested in how I can support and help those 100,000 people do three related things. One, to find each other and continue the work in political education to really understand the intersection of capitalism and white supremacy, to understand how national federal policy is impacting the city of New York and how even the genocide in Palestine does. So that level of political clarity and education, there's no substitute for it. So that's number one. But number two, I would say, how can we as the 100,000 plus who just beat the neoliberal Democratic Party and Donald Trump, who fused together, which is worth thinking about, like where allegiances really lie. I would say, how can we continue to do mutual aid where we can help to create systems of support for ordinary people together outside of the governmental policy? And then the third thing I would do is, how can we best advocate for public policies like public banking and participatory budgeting and universal basic income, real big structural issues, because there's no doubt that the technocratic solutions that can make people's lives better, the Mamdani administration is all over that. I would be looking at a political education campaign, mutual aid campaigns, and then campaigns for deeper structural solutions that would shift Overton's window. So that's where I think about where your question leads.
I want to pick up two things that you mentioned there, specifically the first one. Audience, notice how easy it was for the neoliberal faction of the Democratic Party to unite with Donald Trump against somebody who we believe is pushing true progressive values. I want you all to notice that, how quickly these guys that would purport to be polar opposites came together to fight somebody who actually said, I want to do things that actually work for people. That's number one. Number two, I want you to listen to what Brother Cobb just said, because it's very important. There were 100,000 people activated. And this may be Danny's inexperience. I mean, he's 35 years old after all, not 100% involved in the kind of politics, let's say, that David and Dias been in. How do you, let me back up a bit, Cobb, because you remember Obama for America. You remember how powerful that organization that got created and what happened as soon as the election was over?
Oh, yes.
Dissipation, as if they feared what a movement like that would ultimately produce. So you dissipate it. Is that what's going to happen to Mamdani's great 100,000 people that came about that really want progressive change? We need somebody in there that can point out to that guy, Mamdani, that is untapped power ready to be hatched. Your thoughts?
I think that's a brilliant observation, and I've always appreciated, Egberto, that you look at objective facts and draw conclusions rather than just spit out, one party's talking points. And I do want to underscore what you said, because I absolutely agree. Neoliberals consistently side with fascists rather than leftists or socialists whenever capitalist power is threatened. Right now, they don't under normal circumstances, but if there's an actual threat, then neoliberals will side with the fascist authoritarians. They tolerate it to preserve markets and property rights. They'll violently oppose social movements that challenge ownership, redistribution, and democratic control over the economy. Democratize the economy. That should be our rallying cry. And what's interesting is I would argue that my redneck cousins will join us in a fight for fighting for their own interest if we actually do that. Now, and let's be clear, Obama, for all the fanfare, Obama did, in fact, participate in bailing out the banks in conjunction with Larry Summers and George Bush. And it's really interesting, at the time that the Tea Party emerged was literally a reaction to the bank bailouts when capitalism was in failure, right? And there was a moment, the Obama presidency could have reignited FDR's legacy. It could have been a profound shift, but because, and I say this kindly, but clearly, because Obama did not have a vision around democratic control of the economy, was unwilling to challenge ownership and redistribution, instead bailed out the banks. And so during that moment, I mean, I was here, I'm here in Humboldt County. You and I knew each other in Texas, of course, but I now live in Humboldt County, California. I'm literally less than a mile away from the county courthouse here. And during that uprising, there were ordinary people out there, and it covered the left and the right and center. Just people were pissed off at the big bank bailouts. And, Egberto, I came up, you and I are of an age where that's the left's signature issue, right?
Exactly. Yes.
That should have been, we should have been leading that charge. But because President Obama, remember that entire bailout happened while George Bush was a lame duck, and Barack Obama was the president-elect. So it was a really interesting time. So one thing that people don't understand is that entire bailout was an agreement between the leadership of both the Democratic and Republican parties that they hammered out together. So was it Bush's fault? Was it Obama's fault? They both agreed this is the best way to do it. Because Bush was in office still at the time, Obama implemented it. That's the reason that they had to come together. It's the reason that you see so many photographs of the Obamas and the Bushes, being so friendly and kind. Now, I agree with friendliness and kindness, but they agree with one another.
They saved capitalism. They saved a system that harmed a lot of people. After they saved capitalism, how many people lost their homes again? After they saved capitalism, how many people went into poverty again?
Oh, it's astounding. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but we could get them easily. But here's the narrative that I want to remind folks of. All those folks who were out there milling about, if we as progressives had actually provided leadership and political education, we could have helped people have a consciousness, an understanding of it. But because people were just too busy celebrating the first Black president, which deserves to be celebrated, but they weren't willing to criticize the bailout plan because of it, what happened? The Koch brothers came in with their organizers and their buses and their shiny placards, and they took over what became the Tea Party movement. And that could have been a populist, left progressive populist movement, but it didn't for exactly the reasons that you just described, Egberto. And and look at what they did to the Occupy movement. Remember, Occupy, which you and I were part of.
I was just about to bring that up. Let me tell you, David, let me first address something that you said. I gave my mea culpa about Obama years ago. I was one of those who didn't want to criticize this guy because he was a Black guy, first Black president, and I knew the spears were going to be out for him. I didn't want to be one of those other spears in him. That's just the social reality. The social reality. But you can't. What you have to learn as you're a member of these organizations is you can't be for the individual. You have to be for the cause. And it is so often something that many of us, even though many of us that are still in the left movements, have failed to realize. Maybe because I'm getting older, I was able to realize it's never about the individual. It's always about the cause.
And systems.
And right.
And Egberto, so thank you for that. And this is one of those things that I remember we definitely talked about. And what I want to underscore is capitalism and white supremacy and racism are not parallel systems.
Integrated. They're dependent on each other. Yes.
Capitalism did not emerge as a neutral market system that was corrupted by racism. Capitalism itself was forged through conquest, through enclosure, through slavery, and colonialism. These are processes that require ideologies to justify an extreme exploitation, extreme domination, and degradation. White supremacy provides that justification. It functions as both a material and ideological technology that enables capital accumulation, and it divides the working class based on pigment and skin color, right? I mean, there's a great history of Bacon's Rebellion that we could go into sometime.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I want to lift up the great thinker, W.E. Du Bois, who showed in his seminal work, Black Reconstruction, that white workers get what he termed for the first time ever, psychological wages that compensated them for their exploitation with a type of status and access and a proximity to power. So the point I'm making, Egberto, is the movement that I am part of and the world that I want to live in understands that power over domination and exploitation is a systemic thing, and both capitalism and white supremacy and heteropatriarchy and settler colonialism are all interconnected manifestations of that. And the world that we deserve and the world that human beings lived in for 95% of the time we've been on this planet has actually been power with. It has been egalitarian. It has been ecologically regenerative. So we're not trying to create something that's never existed before. That's what the right wing lies to us about. We're trying to get back to what is actually our natural way of how we should be living.
You know, it's great that you said that, because I have some of the best listeners on the planet, bar none. I know I'm prejudiced for my own listeners, but one of them pointed that out, that we are not trying to create something new as people would let you believe. The world has mostly during its existence been sort of an egalitarian society. And, so it is something that we should learn about. We shouldn't need, but more importantly, David, what we are trying to do, first of all, is explain the now and how we get to the next. And here is the thing. One of the things that I use as a unifying message is, you mentioned the slavery issue. You know, that slavery used to look like this. My pigmentation, chattel slavery, that is. There's been all kinds of slavery throughout the world. But chattel slavery here in the United States and the West used to look like me. And what I point out to my audience, let's recall this. While slavery used to look like what I look like, now slavery is whenever or whomever looks in the mirror. I call it antiseptic slavery. And antiseptic slavery is what capitalism has done to us all. And the thing about it is, whereas it could be hidden by most of you saying, at least I'm not Egberto, at least I'm not you. You can no longer say that, because as extractive as it is, because of simple math, after it has eaten everybody else, it is coming to eat you. You look in the mirror and you see what antiseptic slavery looks like. We are coming close to the end, and I want to talk a little bit about your new program. So before we get there, give me your thoughts on that. And then tell us a little bit about that new program you are doing on democracy at work. So, answer what I just talked about, and then tell me about your program.
Well, thank you so much, Egberto. Like we always do, we got into a really fascinating conversation, but I do want to hit a couple of key points.
Please do.
The approach that I believe will both address capitalism, white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, settler colonialism is a framework called the solidarity economy to unite working class people across both race and social divisions. Solidarity economy is not charity. It's not merely reformist. It is not ethical capitalism. It is a counter system rooted in democratic ownership, cooperation, mutual aid, ecological sustainability, and community system-rooted democratic ownership. Community land trust, public and cooperative finance, participatory budgeting. There are mechanisms to do it. I want to encourage your listeners to go to the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network, conveniently USSEN.org, stands for U.S. Solidarity Economy Network, or a growing movement called Resist and Build. You can find that at resistandbuild.net, where we resist the harms and abuses that are happening now, but also build those alternatives. And that's where, if you want to see that put all together in very concrete ways in 6 local communities, go to the People's Network for Land and Liberation, which is landandliberation.org. And you can see what that looks like in 6 different places. And I know you always put the hyperlinks and all your stuff because I'm on your list too, Egberto.
Yes,
so I know what a great job you do. So all I'm saying is, folks, if Egberto has me on some other time, I promise to be more disciplined and get into the very concrete what is to be done now. But Egberto and I spent a lot of time sort of understanding the problem, but there are solutions, and these solutions are what we lift up on Redneck Gone Green. Every week, I bring somebody in. We're on Monday live on the Democracy at Work YouTube platform. I also write a Substack and have a podcast. It's all Redneck Gone Green. And the point is, Egberto, to bring activist social change agents like yourself into the conversation to help people to understand, because I'm talking to an audience that's working class, that is not necessarily as deeply entrenched in the work that you and I have done and do, but we do, in fact, have those conversations every week, every Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. You can catch us live, which I'm really excited about, on the YouTube, on the Democracy at Work platform, where there are over 500,000 subscribers already. And if you prefer writing, go to Substack, Redneck Gone Green. I've got about 4,000 subscribers there, where I write a weekly essay about who my guest is going to be every month. And I'm really excited, Egberto. Our audience, like yours, is growing. And I would be remiss if I did not point out now that, in fact, none other than Egberto Willies will be a guest on Redneck Gone Green coming up in January, Monday, January 19th. Egberto will be, January 12th. Egberto will be our guest, and we'll talk about the work that you're doing, building independent people's media that's connected to activism, because it's not just enough to understand the problem. We have to answer the question, what is to be done?
You know, one of the reasons I love having you on every time is not only that we can remember all the things that we did together, but it's always also a learning experience. And you brought up a topic, and we got to close, but I got to say this. You brought up a topic that you said, ethical capitalism. Let's tell the truth about it. We know that Elizabeth Warren is a good person, and she tried to do something of that nature. But there's not ethical capitalism is what define what that is. It is not possible, but define what
because the definition of capitalism, right? Like, and I would argue that, and I'm glad you actually brought that up. Like, I just had the privilege of facilitating a nationwide public banking webinar. You can check that out online, and I moderated that. We had over 1,000 people participate. Senator Elizabeth Warren was the opening person that we talked to. So, you know, again, she does so much good, but this idea of ethical capitalism, I think, is fundamentally impossible, because the definition that Egberto and I laid out in the beginning of our conversation. And frankly, if you tweak capitalism so much that you make it both ecologically sustainable and ethically It's not capitalism
Right.
anymore.
At that point, it ends.
Definition. So I think we would be much better off if we actually talked about democratizing the economy, talked about community self-determination. We can sort of get out of the arguments over definitions and get into, well, what is the world that we want? And when we do that, Egberto, not only can you and I work together, but again, my redneck cousins, all of a sudden I'm having good and positive conversations with them. So it's an interesting time to be alive.
Well, David, it's impossible for us not to be working together, whether we are talking to each other or not. The fact that we are symmetric in the way we think tell us that we're working together. Now, I want to first of all tell you that yes, we need to have you on again to talk the specifics that you want to talk about, because this discussion was led in sort of the direction that I wanted to take. Knowing your competencies, I wanted to get this out of you. Well, the next time I'll just sit back and say, David, what is it you want to come on and talk about? Oh. And that is what we're going to talk about. Okay,
well, it was a great conversation, Egberto. And as always, you're so charming and you're such a very good interviewer. And you did take us into a big picture conversation,
right?
About like what is happening, sort of in the world now. And if you have me back on,
you will be, not if. When you come back on, and I promise one thing, you're going to direct what I need to do when you come back on.
Yeah, much love to you, Egberto. And again, remember, y'all tune in to Redneck Gone Green for Egberto Show, because one thing that we need to do, let's just be really clear, we need to cross-pollinate our audiences, right? Like, because my listeners need to hear from you, your listeners need to hear from us. We need to create a genuine progressive echo chamber that can match what the right wing and what the corporate media are doing.
David Cobb, the people's lawyer, and now one of the hosts of Redneck Gone Green. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Bye now.
All right, folks. Later on, I'm putting this into the blog video format, and I'm going to have it posted later on. Just this interview. I hope to have it done tonight, because this kind of came on quick and I didn't get a chance to do as much advertising for it, etc. Anyway, Patrick Magner said something important. You cannot grow exponentially ethically. Exactly. Because exponential growth means the denial of others. Patrick, you are wise. You are wise. Don't you have a progressive echo chamber already? I wish we had a progressive echo chamber, but we don't. We absolutely do not. I think I saw something from E2247. How you doing, E2247? That you said you wanted me to watch. Let me ask you to do me a favor, E2247. How do you talk to us? Do you talk to me via Facebook or otherwise? Let's see. If you talk to me during Facebook, please send me a Facebook message, using the Facebook message system with the link itself. Because let me just tell you, the amount of messaging that I have from all these different platforms, sometimes it takes me a while to get to it. When you have something specific that you want me to check out, please send it like my brother Bradlin always does, either the Facebook messaging or the Substack messaging, which I can know it's directly to me and not a part of the entire chat. All right, we're at 56, and I think I'd like to see if anybody wants to give a quick call in before I close her down for the day. Anybody wants to call in? I got a lot of blogging to do tonight after my exercise. I got to do at least 45. I think I'm going to do an hour of exercise as soon as I get off of this here, because I don't want to go to doctors. So I try to exercise and keep myself relatively aerobically fit. All right, give me a call. If anybody wants to make a comment. I don't have interns at Stadion. I don't believe in having people do stuff for me for free. I am sorry. It's just that thing that I think is sort of abusive. Just my kind of way of being. A lot of people have been telling me, go get interns, go get it. No. When I can afford to pay them, which means when my membership is increased enough, I'll be able to give stipends. But until then, I can't do that. I'll work my 16 hours a day. But anyhow, folks, anybody wants to give me a quick call, telephone number 281-823, 281-823. Egberto, not enough comments to read out, huh? Well, it's not that it's not enough. It's I got to go way up and start reading it. I'm glad you liked the interview, Paul Fleming. But we got a lot of comments, my brother. But I'd like somebody to give a call if in the next couple minutes or so. I like to hear from the audience verbally as well. I see you all in the chat often. And by the way, Radden, where is my short for the day? You know the way we ask the my brother in in Michigan. You know, sometimes you know how Zarnik. Zarnik normally gives us our limerick. Of course, he's behind on his limericks. What's up, Zarnik? Where are you, my brother? We normally get our shorts from Radnin, and we get a whole lot of commentary from Brother Paul. So we have the regulars here that give the same thing, and don't forget about EZ224. What is it? EZ2247. EZ2247 keeps me on, reminding you that the Israeli massacre, the Israeli genocide continues. Let's remember that. The Israeli genocide continues. All right, we are at 3:59. I guess I won't get a call today, so it's time for me to do my one and only ask to say, please, for those of you that are listening, please consider becoming paid subscribers. That is what funds everything that we do here. And to do that, you can simply go ahead and visit politicsdoneright.com/newsletter, politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. If you're already on Substack, just click that subscribe button and become a paid subscriber. It's a coffee, guys. It's a coffee. And with that coffee, you can really, really solve problems. You can really help us do what we're doing. You heard David recall, we would I at the same time I was in two organizations trying to make some changes to the Constitution, Move to Amend and Coffee Party USA. And in Move to Amend, we would rent a house twice a year in a city, sometimes in California, Illinois, New York, North Carolina, Georgia, and we'll rent a huge house, and about 15, 20 of us will be in that house. We cook together, we drink coffee together, we're just in there, group of activists talking policy and politics. And we spend 4, 5, 6 days doing that. And it's always enlightening and empowering because we go from item number 1 all the way to item N. And then we do the same thing with the coffee party, but in that case was how do we work together? Uh, Harry Denson, I'm about to exit, so give it to me in 30 seconds, my brother.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say is the Republicans we know do not want to include the subsidies. They keep vote. The House is voting on a bill, and my question is on that is what are the Republicans offering as an alternative to get people's health care insurance cheaper?
Okay, that's
in
very.
the bills that they're proposing.
There's a simple answer. They do not believe in offering help. They believe the market should take care of it all. That's your answer, Harry.
I agree.
I mean,
they don't have any. They don't have any plan.
There's no answer. So I got to go.
They
Harry,
have no plan.
Harry, thank you so kindly for calling in, my brother.
Tomorrow. Just work out. Tell your wife and your daughter I said hello.
Will do, Harry. Thank you very much for always remembering my wife and daughter. I got great callers. I've got great folks that are members of the PDR posse. Lynette says, Egberto, are you going to do time with live DJT tonight? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I probably should, right? Okay, Lynette, I'll think about doing it if I can get all the work that I need to do done in the next 3 hours. I'm not going to get all done, but if I can get some of that done, I'll do that. Okay. So thank you. Anyway, got to go, guys. Please visit politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. Subscribe. Please become paid subscribers. That is how we can get this done. Love you all. Write me at info@politicsdoneright.com. info@politicsdoneright.com. Mi nombre es Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. You guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.